In the summer of 2019, there seemed to be no stopping Marlon Moraes. The fighter had recovered from a slow start to becoming one of the UFC's most feared finishers, and all roads pointing towards the Brazilian finally claiming bantamweight gold. The goodwill, however, would be short-lived, as a failed title bid sent Moraes on a spiral that led to his departure just 3 years later. Today, we look at how MMA's Magic Man lost his sparkle. Welcome to the INC, and today we ask, what happened to Marlon Moraes? In 2017, Marlon Moraes made his UFC debut against Rafael Assunção at UFC 212, but his road to the octagon proved a lot longer than many realized. Moraes made his debut competing for regional promotions in his native Brazil, earning a reputation as a kill or be killed fighter, with all but 2 of his fights ending in the first round. Despite his aggressive fighting style, Moraes found success hard to come by, and by 2011 had amassed a record of 5 wins and 4 losses. The faltering start led Moraes to begin competing at 135, a decision that invigorated the Brazilian's career. Moraes came to national focus in 2012 when he took on former bantamweight king Miguel Torres for the World Series of Fighting. Torres had been one of the WSOF's highest profile signings due to his success with WEC, and expected to make easy work out of his misfiring opponent. It was Moraes, however, that claimed the upset win in what was later seen as a changing of the guard moment at 135. The win would be the catalyst of Moraes' career. Between 2012 and 2017, the Brazilian embarked on a reign of dominance over the WSOF, winning 11 fights in a row and the company's bantamweight title in the process, all while showcasing the knockout power and clutch submission game that became his trademarks over the coming years. By the time the WSOF restructured into the Professional Fight League, Moraes held the record for the most wins and title defenses in company history, and it wasn't long before the UFC took interest in the Brazilian. Moraes' company debut proved to be a fruitless one, as the fighter suffered a split decision loss to Assunção in front of his home crowd. For the next 2 years, however, it would be the only blemish of his company tenure. Moraes would come back in style. A decision over John Dodson was followed by a short-notice win over Aljamain Sterling at Fight Night Fresno, Moraes holding the distinction of being the only man to finish the future champion in his MMA career. After snapping the 20-fight winning streak over Jimmy Rivera, Moraes was considered one of the UFC's in-form fighters, and setting the stage for a rematch with Assunção in the main event of Fight Night Fortaleza. Moraes would avenge his debut in emphatic fashion, dropping Assunção twice in the first round before finishing the fight with a guillotine, claiming a 3rd straight performance bonus and Assunção's first stoppage loss for 8 years.
That's it, there's the tap! Marlon Moraes gets it back against Rafael Assunção!
Having been a cult favorite for the majority of his career, the fight launched Moraes to the sport's mainstream, a pint-sized knockout artist breaking stereotypes over the UFC's smaller weight classes, as well as a blessing for a company desperate for relevant Brazilian title contenders. While most fans clamored for Moraes to get a title shot, the fighter faced competition from Henry Cejudo, who thrust himself into title contention after a win over TJ Dillashaw at Fight Night Brooklyn. The decision over which would get the title shot, however, would be made much easier. In March 2019, bantamweight champion TJ Dillashaw was given a 2-year suspension by USADA after testing positive for EPO prior to his match with Cejudo. Dillashaw chose to relinquish the title rather than have it stripped by the UFC, leaving Cejudo and Moraes to fight for the vacant belt at UFC 238. While Cejudo stole the pre-fight build with his King of Cringe gimmick, Moraes' preparation was much more stoic. With knockout power and former lightweight champion Frankie Edgar as one of his training partners, the Brazilian was confident a long-awaited title was well within reach.
I fought every guy I fought was the top 8 fighter, and I beat all of them. You know, I knocked out 3 guys. I dropped all the fighters. So I'm on the level, you know, and I prove it. And it's just a matter of time that I show that the World Series of Fighting champion, now it's gonna be the UFC champion.
Moraes started the fight in typically aggressive fashion, blasting low kicks and counter shots to Cejudo, who seemingly looked out of sorts in his new class. By the middle of the second, however, Cejudo turned the tide, using a Muay Thai clinch to hammer Moraes with knees and uppercuts. sapping the Brazilian's cardio in the process. Moraes was a sitting duck come the start of the third round, and after the Olympian managed to get the Brazilian to the ground, there was only going to be one outcome. Moraes would later admit his eagerness to finish the fight caused him to deviate from his corner's game plan. But what was seen at the time as a short-term setback proved to be the turning point of his career. Despite the disappointment of the Cejudo loss, Moraes was rewarded with a marquee matchup, as he welcomed MMA legend Jose Aldo to the bantamweight division at UFC 245. Most MMA fans were skeptical on Aldo's drop to 135, and those fears seemed to be realized as Moraes swarmed the former featherweight with a series of early head kicks. Aldo, however, was soon able to find his feet, shaking Moraes twice in the second, and while the third proved more competitive, it was the former champion who appeared the more aggressive fighter. Most fans agreed Aldo had done enough to claim a win over his fellow countrymen. Unfortunately, Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder were on the judging panel for the fight.
Magic Marlon Moraes!
Despite getting his hand raised, the fighter brought about questions over Moraes' conditioning, with many believing the fighter's excessive weight cuts were having an adverse effect on his cardio. Moraes had been known as one of the biggest cutters at 135, even receiving a fine from the California State Athletic Commission for gaining 14% of his body weight prior to his match with Jimmy Rivera. The UFC, meanwhile, seemed to agree with fan reaction to the Aldo bout, as the veteran was given a title shot despite losing his previous fight. Moraes, meanwhile, was forced to settle for a main event against Corey Sandhagen at UFC Fight Island. Sandhagen had earned a reputation as one of the most awkward and explosive fighters on the roster, and after a kick-heavy opening round, the Sandman added another clip to his highlight reel.
No, that's swelled up straight away. Oh! What a kick! And he falls!
The fight was the latest blow in a difficult 2020 for Moraes, who had seen a match with Peter Yan fall through after UFC Kazakhstan was cancelled that April. The desperation to end the year may have affected Moraes' decision-making, as the fighter made a surprisingly quick turnaround to take on Rob Font just 2 months later. While Font had earned a reputation as a divisional dark horse, most expected Moraes to make comfortable work of the Boston fighter. Instead, Font rocked the Brazilian with a quick combination, but finishing the match with ground and pound. Having been knocked twice in the first 30 fights, Moraes had now suffered 4 in his past 5, and questions were being raised over whether the once feared Brazilian could still cut it as a top-level fighter. Moraes wisely chose to adhere to the doctor's orders and wouldn't return to competition for 9 months, where he took on grappling ace Merab Dvalishvili at UFC 266. The match was seen as a mixed blessing for Moraes. While Merab lacked the knockout threat which caused Moraes problems in recent fights, the Georgian's all-pressure wrestling was seen as too big an obstacle to overcome. Moraes' best chance would be to catch the grappler early in the fight, and in the middle of the first round, the Brazilian did just that.
When you start fighting down the rankings.
Moraes dropped Merab twice in quick succession, and was seemingly on the verge of a much-needed win, only for the Georgian to recover as Moraes gasped, attempting to finish the fight. Moraes would take over 100 unanswered strikes before referee Keith Peterson waved off the fight midway through the second round. By this point, the casket had been prepared for Moraes' tenure in the UFC. Chinese prospect Song Yadong hammered home the final nail. A 5th stoppage loss in 6 fights proved the final straw for Moraes, who announced his retirement from the sport 15 years to the day of his pro debut. Most fans expressed relief at Moraes' decision, seeing the downfall as unworthy of a fighter of his quality, and wished him luck for a future free of the pitfalls that come with combat sports. For about 5 months. In September 2022, Moraes announced he'd sign a deal to compete for the Professional Fight League, a 156-day absence making it one of the longer MMA retirements in recent years. Moraes' debut came against his namesake Shaman, a man Moraes had beaten in the World Series of Fighting back in 2015. Moraes got the upper hand in the first 2 rounds and even showed flashes of his old self, before cardio issues and his increasingly brittle chin came to prominence in the third. Moraes losing the fight, and based on WCW logic, the rights to his surname in the process. The presumably Marlon Smith hasn't given up reversing his fortunes, and in 2023 was announced as a contestant for the PFL's featherweight tournament, where he looks to snap a 5-fight losing streak against defending champion Brendan Loughnane. On paper, Moraes' downfall is no different to other fighters, with mileage and durability catching up to him along with the misfortune of being caught in bantamweight's golden generation. The late emergence of the fighter to big stage making his drop-off seem more dramatic in comparison. Out of form and switching weight classes, most are already writing off Moraes' MMA career. Then again, that's what they said in 2011. This is the INC. Please like, share, subscribe, and ring that bell so you never miss a video.